So I do want to make sure that you understand where to go. We go to our account section. As you can see, I have a few sample accounts that I am able to manipulate. However, I want to pretend like I don't have any accounts, right? And I'm sure yours is blank as well, or you have the one test account that you might have created along with me on the last session. What you want to do is click on Import. You will see this side screen pop up. This side screen is where you will either, number one, drag and drop files and map the content of your CSV. Remember, if you need to download a sample of what we have, so you can go off of that, here is the CSV sample you can download. So the first thing that I want to do is, drag and drop here the file. You can click on browse as well. It's the same process. So in my case, I am going to bring over my list. Notice that at the top, there are various steps. The first one is to upload. The second one is to map the account information. There are some settings to settle, and then we map the contact information. There is a mapping of the account and then a mapping of the contact. Sometimes it's difficult to understand that in the beginning, but again, there will always be two phases to importing: mapping the contact and account information. First thing that you'll see is TaxDome says, well, you hopefully will have an account name column. It'll automatically detect it, and it'll detect all the columns that you have in your CSV. In this case, I am going to select account name because that is the name of my accounts. Usually by default, you don't have to touch this. If you happen to name the column account N instead of name, this is where you want to do a drop down and make sure you select the right column. Choose account type. Remember, you can have 3 account types. It can be other, it can be individual or company. And you want to tell TaxDome that you have specified that information. In this case, I do have companies and individuals on the same sheet. So I'll tell TaxDome that I have a special column for that. Otherwise, if your whole sheet are strictly individuals or strictly businesses or strictly other, you can predetermine these titles. However, I know I set up a column for that. I worked hard on that, so I want TaxDome to read that. It automatically will detect the name. And if you don't see the account type name here because maybe you spelt it differently, you want to make sure that you choose it from your columns. It'll give you a preview here. And if this shows up as a phone number or something, you know there's something wrong. In this case, a sample answer is company, and that is correct. That is my correct column. Moving down to account fields. You want to be careful in this section because, again, we are mapping strictly account details, not first and last name, not email, not phone number. Unless you want to bring that over to the account section, you may map that. So in this case, I don't want to bring any of this information over because this information is for my contact. My contact will be mapped on stage 4. So really, I want my account information to be accurate. So for example, I have account ID. It's automatically mapped because I already created that custom field. But imagine this wasn't customized. Client ID is something that's part of my account. not necessarily part of my individual contact. I can have husband and wife, and they can have just one account name, or a client ID. A client ID is something that I am bringing over to TaxDome. It's not a standard thing, just like EIN number potentially. Or again, if I want to add the color of my client's car, that can be a customized field. In this case, I created something called a client ID column. And internally in my business, I give my clients a number to ID them. If this isn't mapped, I can manually map it. I'll click on this section and then I'll say sync field. And if it's not in here, I'll create a new field because it really doesn't, TaxDome doesn't know what that is. So I'll call it client ID number. That's something that I want all clients to have, whether it's blank or not. I want the client ID column to show up, or field, custom field. There's two ways to create custom fields. You can go to templates and create them there, or when we are importing, such as this moment. I am creating a custom field that doesn't exist in TaxDome, and I am naming it the way I want. So client ID number. I know that my client ID numbers have letters and numbers mixed together, so I'll leave the field type as text. But if you know that it's strictly a number, you can choose number. If this is a date, like potentially due dates, date of birth, things like that, you can choose these specific types of information for the input, right? In this case, we are going to leave it as text. I'm going to hit save. As I hit save, it created the field for me, and there should be a green check mark. This is how you manage a custom field. Social security number, this is part of my personal contact information, which is not going to be mapped just now. I am mapping strictly what the information on the account should be. EIN number. If I have a business, I want the EIN number to show up when I open the account. So I will map this. I'm going to click sync field, and I am going to look for EIN. And if I don't see it, I'm going to create a new field and call this EIN. It is a text because there are some dashes in here, so I'll leave it like this. And there we go. This is a custom field that I created. This doesn't exist in TaxDome. So I mapped it manually. Date of birth, again, part of my individual. Client ID, I just mapped that. Social, part of my individual information. Notes, I didn't really have some notes, but I can bring them over if I need to, so I'll leave those mapped. Tags are important to make sure you map. Because my column is called tags, TaxDome automatically detects that. That's why it's green. Country, this is something that I do want to ignore because notice that this is country, state, city. This is for my individual contact. I do have fields called company, state, company, city. Those are the ones that I do want mapped to the account in case they are a business. Notice that they're automatically in green because I titled my column exactly how TaxDome detects it. So that's why it's important to use our template so that the columns are correctly named. And if they're not correctly named, if this says company state and it doesn't have the slash province, it's going to be with an exclamation mark. And all you have to do in case that is, for example, shows up like this, like I do have a company state, I am going to sync the field and then just look for the company state and province. That way they are linked together properly. Everything else looks good. The titles match what TaxDome recognizes. So therefore, this information is check marked here. Again, I only want to map the account details. The individual information will be in the fourth stage. So now that I have all my tags and my custom fields mapped, and including the company address. Again, you don't have to have company address mapped if you don't need to, if especially if you're importing individuals, you can ignore this. They potentially will be checkmarked if your CSV file has these fields, but again, they can be blank. That's okay. If I click continue, you will see this section. This section is part of settings that you can predetermine before you import. So in this case, we have these toggles that you can turn on and off. The login toggle is important to keep on so that we tell TaxDome that this client has the ability to log in with their email. The notified toggle, I want to make sure they get notified about anything that I send to the client or any action required. An email sync will allow that email address for my client to be synchronized with whatever email I synchronized beforehand. If you don't want to synchronize the email with certain clients, you can toggle those off individually. In this case, we want to toggle these on, and we do not want to send invites. Please do not check this. Invites can be sent whenever you are ready. Right now we want to import. We want to kind of pretend like we send an invite. That's why we're toggling these guys on. But really, we're going to send the invite later when we are ready, and we will cover that today. In this section called tags, you can select a tag on top of all of the tags that you've selected, just in case that you'd like. For example, if I want to add a quick tag called upload, today's date, for example, right? We'll do just this kind of tag. Well, we can't create it. It doesn't exist. And again, there'll be this button called create tag, and I can add it. And this is something that you can do for all of your clients. So on top of all of the tags that I applied, like the 1040, like my bookkeeping clients, my business clients, corporate clients, on top of that, I want everybody to have this so I can know which ones I uploaded today, just for reference. You don't have to do this, by the way. We do have a category that filters your clients by when they were uploaded. So again, there's no need to do this, but if you'd like to add a tag on top of what already exists, you can do it here. Where it says team member, you want to add all of the team members that you want visibility on for the account. So if I want my team to visually locate these accounts and see them and open them, add their names on here. If you feel that there's some security, um, you know, tailoring that you want to do, meaning my two team members here shouldn't look at all of my accounts, just the ones I assigned to them, then you can remove their names, and you can do that later on. And during bulk actions, I'll talk about that more. For now, let's have only my name be accessible, so only I will be able to see all of the accounts. Remember also, we talked yesterday about folders, default folders. These are the folders that are created when we upload a client. Yesterday we looked at all of the templates. Right now, the template that I want to use is called default tax years because it has 2022, 2023, and 2024. Those are the ones that I want to use. So I'll click continue, but you can use the folder structure that you created. You probably might have tailored this. You probably maybe deleted a few folders and just wanted to have the very basics. So make sure you choose the right folder, and if you totally forgot to do that, take a pause and come back, choose the right folder structure under templates and folders, and that way you can have the right folder structure. Remember, all clients imported will automatically get this structure. I'm going to hit continue now, and I'm going to hyper focus on my contacts. First thing, do I want to map the account name? No, because I already did that on the second stage. So I can ignore that. My contact information, I want to make sure it's check marked, and if it's not, make sure that it is by making sure you sync the field. Maybe I spelled contact name different on my column. That means that it's going to show up like this, and it shouldn't, right? So I know that I spelt it wrong, but I know this field exists in TaxStone, so I'm going to sync it, and I'm going to look for that specific field, which is contact name. Here it is. That is common again. If you spelled the column slightly different that from TaxStone recognizes it, you'll see something like this marker here. So I know first name exists in TaxStone. So let's sync and then let's look for first name. Here it is. Otherwise, if you did have the column name exactly how TaxStone recognizes it, it'll automatically be in green. Name, first name, email, phone number is correctly mapped. Account type, we don't need to map that any longer. That strictly belongs to the account, so we can ignore that. EIN number can be ignored because we already mapped that. Date of birth, I do want to map that. It's not mapped here, so I'm going to sync field and see if that field already exists. And I don't see it on here, so I'm going to create the field. Date of birth. And since I know that date of birth is a date, I am going to use this. So the example here is if I create a new client later on in the future, they will have this field and I can click on it and choose from my calendar what that date is. Okay, so I successfully mapped date of birth as a custom field because it did not exist in TaxStone. Client ID, I am going to ignore that because I already mapped that under my account. Social security number and everything else you see here is automatically mapped because it matches the name of the column with how TaxStone recognizes it. So again, in case you see your city that it's not mapped, sync the field and look for the city. You might have just spelt it wrong. You might have just had state instead of / province. You might have had just zip code instead of / postal code. It's really easy to correct. All right, so the next sections here is company address and all that. We don't need to map that. We can ignore all of that. Why? Because we already did that in our first stage, okay? So now that we can ignore all of the account stuff, we can click on continue. In this section now, it'll give you a brief preview on how this is going to look like. Now, don't take this so literal. If you see something like blank, that's okay. Probably you had that blank, but it gives you a general overview of like columns and phone numbers. This looks pretty accurate, right? My phone number column should have numbers in there. My last name should have last names, first names first. So it looks good. We created custom fields, an EIN, client ID number, date of birth. I'm going to start the import now. Depending on how many clients need to be imported on your file, this can take a few minutes. If let's say you had a list of 500 clients, it could potentially take about 15 minutes to get everything uploaded. It just depends on that client list. In this case, I have successfully imported the list that I had. You want to make sure that you don't leave this window because it'll provide us with any errors. It will tell you, hey, these are the accounts that I created. These were the rows skipped. Rows skipped is important to understand. Rows skipped means I did not import these and I skipped them because of an error. If that's the case, you will see something that you need to download, which is a link to that error line. If it happens to be a few lines, you will be able to open it and you will be able to see that the very last column shows the error. One of the common errors in here is that email um, in this account is not correct. Why is that common? Because you might have typed something like client space at gmail.com. And that space, you shouldn't have space in emails, right? Because you have a space, Taxome says, hey, that's not a valid email. So it will create an error. It will not generate the account for you, and it'll put it into that list. All you have to do is correct whatever error it's giving you and then re-upload that CSV file, whether it's an error with 2 or 3 accounts or 20 accounts. You want to correct the errors and get them uploaded once more. Sometimes you might leave certain columns blank. Maybe you forgot to add the last name. Again, that's the reason why it didn't create a contact. You'll have clarity on that once you download that sheet. But in this case, we had a successful import. So I'm going to click on back to accounts and let's see how that looks like. If you don't see the list here, you can always click reload on the page so that all of your accounts are visible. Beautiful. I think everybody was uploaded correctly. Do you remember we added this additional tag called upload? This kind of just helps me identify that these are the ones that I uploaded today. And because this is my test account, it actually will help me identify which ones I can delete so I can further create great training material, right? So if you want to delete these, I'll show you how to do that in a second. But I want to continue with getting importing done correctly. So for example, let's take a look at some of our married couples, Ned Flanders and Maud, that we imported. First thing that you'll see is this a general overview of everything. Notice that we have all these tabs, but we can have these small preview windows in case there is something pending. You usually want to go immediately into info to get all of the details of the account. Looking at the left-hand side, we mapped the account details first. The account details were our account name, the account type, individual. We did our tags. I added me as a main team member so I can have visibility on this account. And I created a custom field called client ID number. This didn't exist in Taxdome and I wanted to map it under the account, and now it's visible here. Usually when I show this section, it makes a lot more sense of why we want to create custom fields. So now that that's done, on the right side, here are my contacts. We have husband and wife. And this looks good. The upload was accurate. Okay. My account information is correct. If I ever want to update it, I can click on edit and I can maybe remove this tag. I can add more tags if I need to at any moment. I can change this. Maybe this became a company, right? Or maybe it was just created wrong to begin with. You can actually upload a photo, by the way, of your accounts, or your client can do that on their end once they download the app or once they log into their portal. And here are the custom fields that were created, right? We have client ID number, EIN, and in this case, if I want the EIN to show up, I have to fill it out. Otherwise, it's not going to show up on the left. So I want to hit continue and save. And notice that here I have my EIN number because now it is filled with data. Everybody has these fields available to them. If they're blanked, they're simply not going to show up on this side. But again, this is an individual, so they really wouldn't have an EIN number. Clicking on one of my contacts, the information should be here from the CSV. So Social Security, the email, their date of birth, maybe some tags that I wanted to bring over, and also their address. And it will tell you that this contact is linked to this account, which is this exact account that I have open. If mod here was connected to another account, maybe a business account or something, you would see it listed here as well. And you can link more accounts if you need to, if mod becomes a member of maybe this LLC. When I hit save, she'll be linked to this account as well. I hope this makes sense. I want to do an example of another import that can be common. Again, sometimes your CSV file gives you only the main tax tax person. In this case, mod might be the only one listed on my tax software, and it does give me another column called spouse, and that spouse information might be missing emails and phone numbers. So what we can do is do the following. We'll do one import to import the account details and the main tax individual, and then the second import will import the spouse. Let's see how that looks like. And let's look at that CSV sample here. That usually happens with certain softwares. I can't name all softwares that do that, but there are a handful that do, and I want to make sure that you know how to manage that. So for example, we have sample account names here. These are all married individuals. We have their first and last name, we have their phone number, their address, right, their email. And here we have spouse information. So the spouse name, last name, phone number, email, and tags belong to both because they are part of the same account. So let's bring this information over. The first thing that we'll do is bring over the first person, the first partner, and then the second partner will bring in second. So let's import first. Okay, now we're going to bring over our spouse file. Similar to the last upload, we want to make sure that the account name is selected, so Taxom automatically detects that column. In the choose account type, I know these are all individuals, and I didn't really create a CSV column called account type, so I know they're individuals, and we want to make sure that this is selected. If you don't select this, Taxstone will not generate accounts for you. You either have to choose the column that you generated, or just identify in general if they're individuals, companies, or other. I know this is individual. I am going to ignore all of my contact information because remember, we map the contacts on the next stage, on stage 4. Really, all the things that I want to bring in is the tags because that is part of my account. I don't want to bring over a company address and company zip code. Why? Because this is not, I don't have any companies in my CSV. That's why you see this a little bit different from the previous upload that we did. The previous upload had businesses and individuals mixed. So I'm going to hit continue. And in this section, I'm going to leave it all as is. I'm just going to add that tag that says that I did this today. And in this case, I'll leave this all the same. And now this is a good part where we map the contact. I'm going to add the contact information of the first person, which in this case could be husband and wife, doesn't matter. I'm going to ignore account name because I already mapped that in stage 1. And we have first and last name, phone number, city, address, everything's mapped for me because my titles of my columns match what Taxstone recognizes. Remember, if this shows up like this, you want to make sure that you sync it and then you look for the street address. There it is. So the reason why I'm bringing first the information regarding the first person is because we want to create the account and add our first contact. I'm going to do this all over again, but then only map my spouse information. So I'll ignore all of the spouse for now, and I'm just going to click continue. I'm going to hit start import. This should not take long. For me, because I only have 4 accounts to create. In your case, again, if you have about 100 accounts, 200, 300, 1,000, this will take a while. So please have patience. And the way you can check this is by opening a new tab. Don't close this one, and going into your accounts. Reloading and refreshing the page will show you all of the accounts so far that have been created. Don't close this window so that you get the screen of completion, okay? In this case, everything was successful. I'll click on back. And let's take a look at some of our couples here. So Moore and Rita Jason, that's an account that I just brought in. All right, so in this case, let's see. It looks like there was a duplication, and that's easy to correct, by the way, but we do have just one contact. That's the husband, Jason Moore. So we want to make sure that the spouse comes in, right? We'll take care of this duplication in a second. And let's do that second import here. Okay, in this case, again, account name is automatically here. I know these are individuals. I'm going to ignore everything. Tags should be good. I am going to add that tag so I can recognize this was uploaded for me. I'll hit continue. And this is the good part here. We're going to ignore all of these details. I'll leave the city and the state because couples usually live together. So I want to make sure that they have the same address. I'll ignore the email for that because we have our own emails for the spouses. So Rita here, that's her first name. And if you don't see it right away, you could type it in. First name, last name, spouse phone number, and email. So notice that all I had to do is just map the information to this section, okay? These fields already exist, and I don't want to create custom fields for these. I know that first name already exists because I'm created a second contact. I will leave the address because they belong to the same address. So I ignored the first contact that we initially imported, and I'm bringing in the spouse information. I'm going to hit continue and then start import. And I'll give it a second. I'll open up the More family there so we can see how Jason was already there. And now we should have the spouse brought over. When you bring over a same account, you won't duplicate the account. That'll never happen. Taxon will not allow duplications. It's just never going to happen. However, contacts may be duplicated simply because if you imported it once, on the second import, if you change something or if there was a slight difference in information, they can potentially duplicate, and duplicates are really easy to manage. We'll talk about those shortly. Okay, successful import. Let's look at the same account that we looked at earlier. Let's see. Let's look at Jason and Rita Moore. And now we successfully have Rita on here. Jason's on here twice because it seems like there was a duplication. Really easy to correct. Again, I'll address that in a second. But first, we created the account, imported Jason, did a second import, imported Rita. That's how you manage a second version of importing for another contact. So I hope this makes sense to you. Please, if you're watching a recording, you can rewind this, come back to it, and see exactly the steps that were taken to do the import. So after doing this import, it's a lot of information to take in, and I want to make sure that everybody understands how to manage this. So I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm going to come